Hey, Grandpa, what was the world like when you were a kid?
Well, when I was your age, around 1930, my parents separated and I was forced to live with my mother in an apartment in St. Louis. Growing up without a real father figure was tough, but I studied hard in school and was able to earn decent enough grades to get admitted to Columbia University. There I met my good friends Jack Kerouac and Allen Ginsberg, who shared my passion for writing. These guys gave me a whole new viewpoint on life. They turned me against the conformity of mainstream society and showed me the power of individual expression. I remember staying up all night writing with Jack at least twice a week, keeping ourselves awake with caffeine and Benzedrine. Me, Jack, Allen, and a bunch of other guys met up and began calling ourselves the Beats. In 1955, we all decided to go out west to San Francisco for the 6th Gallery reading. One of my fondest memories of my college pals was at this reading when we all drunkenly read our poetry and shared a lot of laughs. Unfortunately, we were all very different people, and towards the end of the 1950s, we began to go our separate ways. I left San Francisco soon after the 6th Gallery reading to live back in Greenwich Village, New York, and there my love for jazz transformed into a love for rock and roll, which was rebellious like the writing but sounded better. Old geezers like our parents hated it, but young folk like me couldn't get enough. It was unlike anything we'd ever heard. You see, over in England there was this rock and roll movement going on, and when it arrived on the shores of the U.S., everyone went nuts. I never forget standing outside the television store in 1964 watching the Beatles play their first U.S. performance on the Ed Sullivan Show. Along with them came some other British bands like the Rolling Stones, the Who, the Animals, man, I could go on. The sort of music spoke to our souls and made us feel rebellious. My friends and I had seen and heard all about the stuff that was going on out west, so we moved to San Francisco. The music followed, and there I saw the beatniks transform into tie-dyed, freedom-preaching hippies. In San Fran, my old friend Neil Cassidy introduced me to Ken Kesey, who showed me a whole new world of music and drugs. He began throwing acid tests, which is where I first tried LSD and met members of the Grateful Dead. Drugs and music became the sole purposes of my life, and they controlled almost everything I did. All of a sudden, I was going to concerts out in Golden Park and dropping acid almost every day. Looking back at it, most of the 1960s were a blur of music and drugs for me. One big thing going on at the time was the Vietnam War. Almost everyone I met in San Francisco hated the war, so I decided that I hated it too. Anti-war protests popped up like mushrooms. Now, back in 1972, I was in Texas seeing the Grateful Dead perform at the McFarland Auditorium in Dallas. After the show, I remember stumbling around and winding up with a group of feminists. They kept talking about this Roe versus Wade case that was going on, and it seemed pretty interesting to me, so I joined them. You see, around 63, some lawyers persuaded this girl Jane Roe to go to the DA about an abortion she wanted. This got taken to the Supreme Court, and by January 73, the court ruled that no state could deny a woman an abortion by federal law because of her inherent rights. Chief Justice Blackmun started talking like they was going to reinterpret the Constitution. Very moved, I became largely involved in the feminist movement and attended various rallies throughout the country. And it just so happened that I met your grandmother at one of these rallies, and the rest, well, is history.